Hi, this is Karen Overton, the Quilt Rambler, coming to you from my studio. Today I have a beginner-friendly tutorial for you of a pattern I designed called Joy Comes in the Morning. I have two different samples here on the design wall. I say it's beginner-friendly because I'm going to show you how to put simple squares, half-square triangles, and combination units together to make this beautiful springtime wall hanging. So let's get this party started, okay? Be sure and use the link below to download the PDF instruction sheet as well as the supplies needed for this project. I chose to use fabrics from my signature collection by Island Batik called Baby Bloomers. You're going to need a half of a yard for that background, okay? And then we have 5 different flower choices. Now I'm going to show you that your main flower needs a little bit more than about a fat quarter, but your other 4 you can actually get out of your scraps. So let's take a look at how we would do that out of a 10-inch square. I prefer to use scraps or even a 10-inch square for 4 of the main flowers. You can see how that works by having your large square here and 3 of your smaller units here. Follow the instructions on the PDF to know what sizes to cut. In addition, you're going to need a fat quarter of a beautiful spring green for the leaves. So let's get this party started. I'm going to show you how to make 8 at a time half square triangles. Okay, here I have gathered my large square. I have one of the background and one of my flower fabric. These are put right sides together. Because I'm using a batik, you generally can't tell which is the right or wrong side. But if you're not using a batik, you'll be sure to make that distinction. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to mark our square using the Quilter's Magic Wand by Deb Tucker Studio 180 Design, because that's going to allow me to draw the lines that I'm going to use to sew on. I am going to place, there's an etched line down the center of this tool. I'm going to place it right on the diagonal point. And I'm going to use a marking pen. I prefer to use a heat erasable pen. Use your favorite pen. And you're going to mark on both sides of the line. This is going to give you your sewing lines. Now we're going to need to rotate the block. If you happen to have a rotating mat, that works really nice. If you don't have a Quilter's Magic Wand, you can actually use a regular tool, but you're going to have an extra step. You're going to need to line that tool up point to point and draw a reference line down the center of your block, okay? From that line, you're going to measure a 1/4 inch on each side, and that will be your sewing lines, okay? Again, using that rotating mat if you have one, makes it nice. Sew that second line. And so now you have a square that is marked with 2 lines if you use the Quilter's Magic Wand to sew on, or 3 lines if you had to use an alternate method, sewing only on 2 of those lines. So let's take it over to the sewing station and get this thing started. Here we are at the sewing station, and I have my square already marked, either 2 lines to sew on or those 3. I generally don't use pins, but if you feel better about that, by all means put a pin, or in my case, I prefer to use clips so that I don't stick myself. I also like to sew with Bianni's stiletto. That helps me keep things straight and push things under my sewing machine. Okay, so we're simply going to sew on these marked lines. If I had all of them prepared, I could actually chain piece. And what that means is once you finish one, you would line up, for example, if this was my next one, you would line up the next one and sew down it. Since we don't have that today, I'm just going to flip this around and sew on the other side. Again, using my stiletto like an extra hand to push the fabric through the sewing machine so that I can keep things straight. We have 2 more seams to go, and then let's see, I'm going to cut this thread off, get it out of my way. Now we have sewn on all 4 of the lines. You can see it better on this side, maybe. We've sewn all of them, and next thing we're going to do is cut this into 8 slices. Using a regular ruler and your rotary cutter, line up your ruler where you are cutting the block in half. I will use my markings on my tool to make sure I'm straight across the top, straight across the bottom, and then I'm going in the center from top to bottom. Now it is just cut in half. Rotate, do the same thing, making sure you're cutting everything exactly in half. And now you have 4 units. Then we can line this up, cut it down the middle between our sewn lines. And on this one, we actually had a drawn line to cut on. And now we have 8 different units that when I open them up, you can see that we have 8 half square triangles. Next, we're going to press these, and I'm going to show you how to trim them. I use a pressing stick because I prefer to press my units open. Let me show you how I do that. I'm going to lay them across the stick and gently do a finger pressing. The stick allows them to kind of fall to the side, a little bit of a gravity, take advantage of there. The reason why I like to press open is because I find that my quilts lay flatter, that I don't have bulk in the seams. As a long arm quilter, I really appreciate that lack of bulk. Also, as a long arm quilter or any domestic quilter, you need to realize that if you press your seams open, you're not going to want to stitch in the ditch when you finish your quilt. Once I press them seams open, I'm going to just hit it with the iron and give them a good little bit of a pressing to make sure they lay flat. Next, we need to trim off the dog ears. This is where I will trim off the dog ears and trim the squares to the size that is needed in the design. I'm going to be using a tool called Tucker Trimmer 1 by Deb Tucker Studio 180 Design. And this tool has the capability of trimming 1-inch increments, or what we're going to be using today is 1/2-inch increments. And you can see here that there are dotted lines so that I know that I'm doing the 1/2 inch, and I can line my fabric up with the lines. I have a line that goes across that will go on my seam, and I have a common diagonal that will also check on my seams. So let me show you how to line up and cut and trim these 8 at once. I'm going to first use that dotted line or the cut line across my seam allowance. In doing so, there's an overage on the sides that I'm trimming off. And then, since I have a rotating mat, I will rotate the unit, line it back up, again, watching that 2.5 inch on the seam. This time I have an additional line, the dotted lines are on the cut edge. And now I have a perfectly squared up 2.5 inch half square triangle. Let's do that one more time. If you don't have a rotating mat, just pick up your tool, rotate the block, and there you go. Follow the PDF instructions to make all of the half square triangles needed for this project. Now I'm going to show you how to make the combination units using that center focus flower fabric. Say that 3 times. I'll meet you at the cutting station. For this unit, we're going to need 1 background square and 3 of our focus flower fabric. Okay, we're going to be making combination units, and out of these 4 squares, we're actually going to make 2 sets of mirror images. Let me show you how we do that. Again, putting right side fabric together, and with me using batiks, you really can't tell that the right sides are together, but trust me on this. I'm going to, again, do my Quilter's Magic Wand to mark on both sides of the little tool to give me my sewing. Now let's walk back over to the sewing machine and we'll sew this up. Okay, just like sewing the half square triangles, we are going to sew on the line that we drew. And again, if you have multiples, you can just do a chain piecing. For this demonstration, I'm just making one. And we're going to sew on each side of the line. And basically, we're going to end up with 2 half square triangle units, okay? Just like we did before. I went ahead and pressed mine and got them pressed open, okay? Do not trim these. They're going to stay untrimmed, and we're going to layer them right sides together again with the other fabric, the other 2 center fabrics. Okay. You'll see that it's oversized, and you can just kind of center it. We will then use the Quilter's Magic Wand again and mark our lines. Whoops, I'm going to turn it around this way just to make it a little bit straighter. I'm lining up with the point of the smaller square because I don't necessarily have that exactly where I want it on the bigger square. I like to do them one at a time, and then that way I'm not spending a lot of time marking. I'm just marking as I go. Now this is where my stiletto comes in handy. I should have been paying attention and holding that down so that my seam does not roll. All right, so let's do the next one. I'm going to place the unit, center it on this square, use my Quilter's Magic Wand to mark on both sides of the tool to have my sewing line. This time remembering to use my stiletto so that I don't have to resettle that seam. Because a lot of times your foot will get caught on that fabric, okay? And I can carefully do it. Now, if for some reason you miss the line, like I did there, it's best to err on the inside of the drawing than on the outside because you'll be trimming that away and you want to make sure you have enough to make your units. So out of the 4 squares, the 3 yellow are the flower and the 1 background, I have now made 4 combination units. I'm going to press these and then we'll go to the cutting station. Oh, I totally missed that one. Forgot to go back and do it. Okay, Well, bloopers happen and real life happens. You get distracted when something walks by your window. So now I have them both sewn. You never know what's going to happen in the Quilt Rambler studio. It's just fun. Now I have them all sewn. I'm going to go cut them apart, press them, and then I will show you how to trim these units. Okay, I have pressed my units. I press them open. I have 4 units to trim, and I am going to use the Tucker Trimmer one again to do that. We're going to be lining up with this common diagonal. We're going to line up with the 2.5 cutting diagonal, and then we're going to use the cutting guidelines for when we square it up. So let's try that. Move these out of the way. I like to line it up where that common diagonal, the solid line, is on my seam. The dotted line, the cutting diagonal, is on my seam. Let's move these out of the way. I'm going to cut the top and the side. Okay, rotate the unit or rotate your turning table. Line it up again. This time you have the cut edges to line up. And there we go. There's our first one. Let's do another. These are actually what we call mirror image because of the way the fabric lays. It's kind of hard to see when I'm using 2 fabrics of the same color in 2 different positions, but there are techniques of when it's really fun to be able to use these to put together. So there we go. We now have our combination units trimmed. I hope you have enjoyed making the half square triangles with the 8 at once technique, as well as making the combination units and trimming them both up with the Tucker trimmer. The next thing we'll need to do is just simply lay out and sew together the quilt top. I wanted to show you just a little bit on camera so you can see the layout of each of the different units. So let's take a look. With the 4 colors of our flower, we are doing a basic tulip layout using squares and our prepared half square triangles. Okay. For the leaves, we're using 4 of the half square triangles, and they get laid out like this. My favorite is the center flower, the focus flower, that uses our combination units and our half square triangles to make a larger, beautiful tulip. All you need to do now is sew them together and you're done. Thank you for joining me today in my tutorial to make Joy Comes in the Morning. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, leave us a comment, and please share with your friends. If you have other tutorials or tools that you would like to learn from the Quilt Rambler, leave that in the comment section also. Again, thank you for joining me. Trick on how to make 8 at a time of those half square triangles to move this blah, blah, blah.
Okay, this is take 3, 5, 7, I don't know, but it looks like we are recording this time, so let's give it a go. This is sound check number 55,000.
Today I have a beginner-friendly All right, I don't have time for all this. I'm sweating. Here. All right, here we go.